Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Anthony. This is part 2 of our series where we're talking about how to read our email with Google Apps Script and put that email into a Google Sheet. And we're not just going to dump the data, we're actually going to format it a little bit. And so what we did in the last video is we created this Google Sheet and we put these column headers here based off of the information we want to pull from our email, and we created some conditional formatting with some statuses. The email that we're interested in today is actually an apartments.com lead. So you can see that this email has information such as name, phone, and email of a renter that's interested in renting, and the property address. This information may be more useful for me if I can get it listed out here, because then I can do all sorts of things. I can send out mass emails, I can link it to MailChimp or do whatever I want. But for right now, let's move forward in what we left off with previously. So previously we created the sheet, we created different functions here, and we're focusing on the parse email function, which is actually going to read our email. Then we zeroed in on the actual sheet we're interested in, which is this one here called sheet 1, hence the sheet 1 here. And then we moved on to the Gmail portion where we're starting to learn how to read our emails. These two for loops are going to be an outer and an inner. The outer meaning we're going to loop through each individual thread, which is this here. Each of these is a thread. And then the inner loop is actually going to loop within each thread to get each individual message within it. So you can see there's 10 here, there's 6 here, there's 7 here, etc. So let's figure out what we should put here. So now we know we've got our threads, which is returned from the getThreads method. But let's figure out how we got here. So let's start with the Gmail app class. So the Gmail app class actually allowed me to say get user label by name. So let me find that. Get user label by name. And what I do is I can see that the get user label by name will return a Gmail label. So now you can see I've got my Gmail label here. You can call that whatever you want, but we're calling it label. And then we're going to say get threads onto that. Well, how do I know I can call get threads? Well, there's a get threads method here. You see the get threads method returns an array of Gmail thread. So let's click on Gmail thread, and we can see all of the next methods in line that we can call against that. So as you can see, the Google Apps Script documentation is very, very thorough, and in which it explains all of the individual methods you can call depending upon what you want to do. So the last one we just said was Gmail thread, which is returned, which is our thread. And it's an array, so I'm going to say threads. And then we'll say for var I equals 0, while I is less than, we'll say threads.length. So the number of threads out there is the number of times I want to loop. So that's, in other words, we're saying loop through each individual row for the number of individual rows that there are. And we'll say I++. All right. The next thing we want to do is look at our inner loop. Well, what's that going to be? Now remember, the inner loop is going to be each individual row is going to have several messages within it. So those are the messages that we want to get. And the way we do that is by creating another variable here, and we're going to call it messages. And we're going to say threads I, which is whatever the current row is, dot get messages. And now we can use the inner loop to loop through that those internal messages within each thread. So we're going to say for var j equals 0, while j is less than messages dot length j++. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do within that is let's just kind of understand what we're doing. We have our outer loop and our inner loop. We're going to start with the first row, and we're going to loop through each individual message within that. And then we're going to jump to the next row, and we're going to loop through each individual message for that. So let's create some variables within this particular loop. that will allow us to pull data that we want. So let's start with date. So we'll say variable, we'll call it dat for date, equals messages j dot get. Now look at the different options we have. Get date is one, get body, get BCC. I can get any of this information, get header, get ID, get plain body, which is going to give me all of the contents of the email itself. I can get the subject, I can get to, like who it went to. So in this case, we're looking at the dates. We're going to say get date. What else do we want? We want the from equals messages j dot get from. We're going to say var subject equals, we'll say messages j dot get subject. Now we may not use all of these, but it just shows you the options that we have out there to use pretty much whatever we want here. You can pull any information from the emails. Now let's do var plain body message, so p message equals messages j dot get plain body. And then we'll say, let's say get, let's do the email address will be the reply to. All right. What else do we need? We need name, right? We have a column here called name, but because the name is actually stored within the body portion of the email, we have to do this a little bit different. So this is where you're going to learn a little bit about how to mess with strings in Google Apps Scripts. It's basically just JavaScript. So we'll say var name equals blank. We'll say phone equals blank. Source equals, and I think for this one we're saying apartments.com. So if we wanted to create another column in our sheet called source, this is how we could put it into there. And if you say have Zillow or Trulia or whatever, you could change the source depending upon where you're getting the emails from. And we'll say var building equals blank. So that's your address basically. Unit equals blank. City equals blank. State equals blank. Jeez. And zip code. So how are we going to get this information? So let's start with the plain body information. So what we can actually do is, let's do this for now. We will just dump our plain body message into a debugging, into the debugger. We'll say logger.log. Let's just say p message. Okay. So what this will do is it'll allow me to basically go through all of the plain body messages and just see how I need to navigate through each one to populate the building, the unit, the city, the state, the zip, etc. So this should work if I run it, but let's go ahead and save it first. It says I have a syntax error on line 14, which for var I, some of you may have caught that earlier. That's all right. For var I equals 0, I is less than threads, dot length, I plus plus. All right, let's save that. All right, so what we're going to do is select the function we want to execute, and we'll say parse email. After we execute this, it's going to ask you for the first time if you are going to give your app permission to read your email. So just step through the steps and say yes, you allow. You may get a prompt that says that it's not safe. Just say it's okay because you know that you're the one doing it. After that's done, you go play or run. And this will allow us to see what the plain body data looks like. So let's go to View, Logs. And now you can see this is the plain body message. This renter was searching on the apartment.com network, blah, blah, blah. So now using simple string functions, you can go through and figure out you can grab any of this information out of here and then you can put that in your spreadsheet. So you can see that starting on a new line, we've got names, colon, space, and then we've got the name until the end of the line. We've got phone, colon, space, and then the phone number to the end of the line, email, etc. Just the way it is in the actual email itself, but this will give you the plain body view of it. So how are we going to get to this? Well, there's no other text in there in this particular email that says phone, colon, space. So what we can do is we can start to use string methods to basically parse through this email. So let's start with name. All right. So we'll say if pmessage.index of, and so now we're going to look for name. Is greater than 0, then we're going to figure out where the end of the line is, okay? So once we figure out the end of the line, we have the beginning of the line and the end of the line, we're going to capture that and then put that into a variable. So we'll say variable end equals pmessage dot substring pmessage dot index of name plus 6. Now the reason why we say 6 is because, remember, if we start at 0, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the 6th is that space at the end. We want to say plus 6, and then we say for a length of pmessage.length. All right. And then what we'll do is we'll say the name equals end.substring 0 to the end of index of a new line. This is one way to do it. There are lots of ways to do it, but this will accomplish the goal. Basically, you just have to find the beginning of the number after name and then go to the end of that particular line. So now that we have that, let's just logger.log that out and see what happens. Logger.log name. And let's do it this way. We'll say name test, so we know that this is what we're typing. We'll try this out. Hopefully it'll work on the first try. And so we'll save and we'll go ahead and play. Now let's view our log. Go to the bottom. Look at that, name test John Smith. So now that I know I have that particular entry stored in name, I can do the same thing with the rest. So that'll continue for the rest. So let's just skip the rest for now, and then we'll go back to it. But after getting name, you'll do phone the exact same way. You'll do address the same way. Unit, city, state, zip the same way. We're going to have a variable called status, which we said is going to be pending. And then from there, we're going to have sheet.append row. And we're going to put this in brackets. So each one of the individual columns are going to go here. So let's look at our columns. What do we have? We've got status through zip. So let's copy this. And we are going to paste that. Let's do a comment here so we know. We've got our status, which we've called status, is the name of the variable. We've got our phone. We've got our email. We've got address, which we called building. We've got unit. We've got city, state, and zip. Now recall, these are all, still just empty strings right now. The only thing we should actually get an actual value of will be the name. So status, name, phone, email, building, unit, city, state, zip. Okay, So let's save this and see if I broke it. Now before I run this, understand how append row works. It's going to look for the last row that has data and then append information after it. So if you were playing around with this earlier, make sure you delete anything you have. So now it's an empty sheet. And then when I push play, you can see that it's going to run. And then look, status is pending, name is John Smith, email is Brunson AC Commercial. I can change it from pending to approved, approved, disapproved, whatever. And that's it. Like literally that's how this works. I think date is important too, wouldn't you say? We actually have date. Here, let's do that. Date. And I think we have date ready here, get date. And so why don't we just add that next to status and we'll say date. Dat. All right. And that wraps it up for this episode. So in the next episode, we're going to finish this out. We're going to add the code that will allow us to import the date, phone, address, unit, city, state, and zip. I'll show you how to turn on a trigger so that this can happen, say, every day or every hour or however often you want it to. And that should be about it. All right, thanks.